Hello and welcome. I am Exalight, and this is not only my channel, but it is the 31 days of Halloween. All 31 days this month, there will be content. Please, if you have found me at the middle or the end of the month, please go ahead and check back through the rest of the month and keep coming back. If you would, please give this video a thumbs up. If you would like to be subscribed and you're not, go ahead and click that subscribe button. And if you'd like to be notified when my content goes live, please go ahead and ring that bell. Also, I'd like to tell you before we get started that there is something in common between all 31 videos. Yes, all 31. If you pay close enough attention, if you are a detective, if you just notice certain details and you figure out what's connected between all 31 days, you will win an Amazon gift card. If nobody figures it out, then we're going to pick the winners from the people who leave comments below the videos. So you still have a chance to win. Leave your comments and then try and figure out what it is. What do all 31 days have in common? I can't wait to hear what you guys think. So, now it's time to get creepy. Let's go. We're going to talk about some nurses sharing their most blood-curdling hospital stories. Ugh. You know who hangs out at the hospital? The Grim Reaper. So here we go. A nurse who said that one night she was sent to oncology at the hospital she used to work at. She was given a patient who was passing away and had been unconscious for several days. At one point during the night, the nurse went into the room and the patient was at the top of the bed and looked at her and said, "Don't let them take me." The nurse was freaked out and asked her who was going to take her. And she said, "That black thing up there." And she pointed up into the air. Then the patient died within a couple of minutes. Our next one. Part of the hospital had been rebuilt and faces on to our unit. A nurse doing something near the window looked across and saw two people moving about in one of the clinic rooms. It's after hours and the clinic is shut. She called a colleague over who also saw these two people. They called security who go over, check out the room, and there's nobody there. A little while later, the nurses again see these two people moving around, so they call security. This time, the security guys split up. One stands with the nurses, while the other one goes over to the clinic to check again. The scary part of this story is that the security guys were talking on radios. The one on the clinic stated that the room is empty, but the other security guard who was with the nurses could clearly see two people standing right beside the security guard while he was talking on his radio. And this one, my mother-in-law has been a CNA for 15 years, and like many new CNAs, one of her first jobs was at a nursing home for the elderly. Soon, before patients at that nursing home passed, they would complain about the children outside being noisy in the dead of night. There were also patients that would comment on the children playing outside their window in the daytime, when clearly there were no children outside. She said she has plenty of other weird stories, but that one is a favorite. Next, something my sister witnessed when she was a med student at a level 1 trauma facility. This guy comes in from an MVA, motorcycle versus truck. She said he was a Waffle House hash brown, sliced, diced, and chunked. The guy is actually able to walk in the beginning because he's drunk. And he's cussing the nurses and the doctors trying to help him. He's not a nice guy. They end up intubating this guy to preserve the airway, and he's going downhill fast. Finally, he codes, but they manage to bring him back. Suddenly, this guy comes completely to, rips out his tubes, grabs the sister's hands, and lets out this breathy little scream. "Don't let me die. I'm going to hell. Please don't let me die." This freaks out everyone, including the sister. The guy says he woke up in hell, on fire, and he keeps begging someone to check his feet for burns. Nobody could believe he pulled out his tube and was talking. Despite everything they did, the guy did die. The sister said that they were all freaked out about it for weeks. And our next one. I worked at a small privately owned nursing home. A lot of the patients had been there a long time. Naturally, I was silly enough to take the night shift for 2 weeks right out of school to cover for the night nurse who was ill. This place had these old hallway lights that you had to stick a paper clip in the slot on the wall to turn them on and off. There was one of these at each end of the main hallway. I carried the paper clip on my keyring. So there I was one night. I come in at 11. I take reports. I set up supplies. I shut out the lights. The only light is from the lamp on my desk and the eerily red exit sign that cast this red wash all over the walls. Anyway, I was standing at the med cart stocking med cups, and I feel a whoosh of air. It's winter, and no windows are open. I hear a rustling sound and think it's the resident in number 3 who is restless sometimes at night. His room is about 6 feet from the med cart. Now, being the brave nurse that I am, I decide to check to make sure that he's not trying to get out of bed. I go over to his room, and I find that he's sound asleep. I do a bed check, and everyone is sleeping and accounted for. The CNA is in the TV room doing flow sheets. I continue with stalking. A little while later, I hear the noise again, and this time, see a figure out of my peripheral vision. They say spirits present themselves in your peripheral vision, and it passed me into room 3. This time, I'm not so brave. I take the CNA with me, who now thinks I'm nuts. We creep into the room and find the patient sitting up in bed having a conversation with someone who isn't in the room. When I ask him who he is talking to me, the man who is sitting in the chair in the corner, he says. Naturally, there's no one in the chair. The aide and I settle him down and we leave the room. At a report the next morning, I'm telling the nurse about what happened. Before I could say who the patient was, she said to me, "He said it was the man in the chair in the corner, right? Creepy." Later, I had talked to the usual night nurse who said it happened all the time when she was on. More than one patient had the same experience. I never did get the name of the mysterious man in the corner. In any case, that was the end of my night shift stint. I am an intensive care nurse. I have many stories ranging from sheets being ripped apart to old women in rocking chairs, but the one which haunts me to this day is the time I actually think I saw the Grim Reaper. It was 1999, late in the day. It was summer and turning dark in a busy 12-bedded ITU in London. I was in charge and at the nurse's station. There were a few people milling around, but less during the day. I looked up to see this man opening and coming through the double doors into the unit. What was so striking about him were his clothes. He looked like he had been picked straight out of 1974 and dropped into 1999. He was wearing brown cord flares, platform shoes that the men wore, an orange, yellow, and brown check shirt with a cream and brown patterned tank top over it. He was white with shortish brown hair, not quite 1970s, and about 30 years old. He walked calmly, like he did this all the time, towards a bay of patients. Not recognizing him and knowing that he was not a relative of the other healthcare person, I said, "Hello, can I help?" He looked at me directly, nodded as if to say hello, and carried on walking. I watched him, and he stopped at the end of a patient's bed and turned to look at them. He never touched the person or do anything other than look at them. This unwell but stable patient suddenly and unexpectedly deteriorated. As the staff went to assist, they all acted like they didn't see him. He turned around, and as calmly as he came, he left. I never saw what direction he went as I left the nurse's station to go and help with the patient, who ultimately, despite our best efforts, died. I spoke to some of our staff later on about our 1970s visitor, and no one else saw him. But it's still vivid in my mind. And now, one night I was caring for a dying male patient. He was scared, and I spent quite some time with him trying to calm and reassure him. Eventually he calmed, and I left the bedside and went over to the nurse's station, which was about 15 feet away. As I sat down, I glanced over at him, and there was a black shape standing over the bed, looking down at the patient. I was terrified, and I am sure that it was something evil. And finally, I was working my regular 7 to 7 night shift in a bone marrow transplant unit with one other nurse. We had 5 patients, and it was about 3:30 a.m. My coworker had come out of room 4, and I startled her as she came around the corner. She had been emptying a urinal when the bathroom door had closed on her, which of course freaked her out, and she spilled the urine on herself. But I digress. She proceeded to tell me that there was a young gentleman who had been in that very room who had died a very gruesome death. Evidently this man was slated to go home. But one night around 4, the nurses heard a thump, like the sound of someone falling. They rushed into the room, and this man was in the bathroom. His central line was out, and there was blood everywhere. They coded him, but he died right there in the bathroom. No one is sure why he pulled his line or what had happened, but evidently the scene was a bloodbath. Horrible. Horrible. Now here comes the scary part. A few weeks later, a sweet little old lady is in that same room, and she asks the nurse if someone had died in there. The nurse explained that this being a hospital, it was likely that someone could have died. Well, the lady says, I think a young guy died in here. The nurse asked her why, and the lady responds, 'Cause he's talking to me. This woman had a central line, a triple lumen. The nurse went in there later, and there was blood everywhere. Her line had been cut. It wasn't pulled out, it was cut. There were no scissors in the room. And the lady was saying, he did it. Thank you for coming. Sleep well.